That question, the next question is the statement.
So go ahead, get your papers out if you want. We can wait 5 minutes for that. So a couple of specific things I wanted to talk about. The first one is, I like how Tyler told you, pick the counterplan for us. That's just like a little thing, but it's just like, okay, we've resolved the conditionality debate, they conceded, so now as a judge I know if I decide for some reason I don't like the counterplan, then I can just vote on the DA always in terms of the case. I also like the inequality work he did. This is kind of the same thing that we talked about before, about especially for the inequality solving the advantage related to income inequality. If they can win, DA turns the case at the inequality level, then they can access that advantage, and then the only thing they have to worry about is the international law advantage. The other thing is, the use of the specific solvency evidence. I like when he says, this is our argument first, then he indicates the site for it, and then tries to lay out a warrant or two for that. It makes it easier as a judge because I'm for sure, there's not going to be any doubt at the end of the debate that if I said I'm going to vote affirmative, I think the counterplan doesn't solve, and he says something about the Benario evidence, this and that, I feel like I'm going to have to answer that question. And one of the things on your judging instructions, if you didn't already look at them, is as a judge, once you decide who you're going to vote for, one of the things that you should do, I only do 3 of them, depending on the debate, I often think about more than that, of what questions are the people who lost the debate going to ask me, and what's my answer? And if he asks me about that, I better have a good answer, or I'm going to be embarrassed that maybe I didn't make a good decision. And so one of the things, and from a debater's perspective, you should think about when you're trying to communicate ideas to your judge, because that's what all this is about. It's not about words per minute, it's about how many ideas per minute can you communicate. And in this 2NR, how many ideas have been communicated to you that make you think, before I vote affirmative, I better have a good answer to this, and hopefully that good answer came in the 2AR. What are the good answers in the 2AR to this argument, this argument, this argument? And I think that's just what good judges do. Good judges kind of, and as Tyler did in one specific instance, he referenced a piece of evidence and he said, this is what they're going to say, and here is our answer to that. So that's another good thing. Preempting what you think some of their important nuances are going to be and what your responses to that are. The 2NR, a good 2NR is as much about giving technically your version of the debate and why you're winning it, but also preempting. So a lot of times you can put notions in the judge's head of when the 2AR says something, you're immediately thinking, yeah, but what about this? Like, counterplan doesn't solve. Okay, what about the Benario evidence? That kind of thing. Putting those ideas in the judge's head so that they're already thinking of what the neg's answer to those things are. Because the opposite of that is if the affirmative says something in the 2AR that I can't immediately think of what the 2NR answer to it is, that's probably a problem. Now, does that mean I won't go back and find it on the flow? One of the other judging instructions is, once you make a decision, who you think you're going to vote for, go back and check every sheet of paper. Every sheet of paper that started the debate in the 1 and C, is there some little argument on this piece of paper that the affirmative said that I kind of forgot about? I first figured out, okay, who's winning the politics disadvantage? Who's winning the counterplan? And then I was like, okay, here's my decision. Oh, what about this advantage? It didn't get talked about much, but there is a 2AR argument there. Is that being dealt with? How does 2AR deal with that? How am I going to answer questions about that? Whatever happened with that spending disadvantage? Is there anything over there that I need to worry about? All of those things are things that judges think about, and the value of this activity for you all, hopefully, is trying to make a decision. Number one, realizing not only is debate hard, but judging is hard. And then secondly, trying to think like a judge would think. It really, really helps. The more that you start judging novice debates, as soon as you can start judging those debates, you start to realize debaters don't say things as clearly as they think that they do. Like, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And the more you have to make decisions and people ask you questions afterwards about, what about this, what about this, what about this, and you're like, I don't know, what about that? I wish it had come up in the debate. Or I wish I'd understood what you were saying about that. Or when you extended a piece of evidence, I didn't really understand the text of that evidence, so I don't really know what that argument was. It's not your job. Like, you're the judges. If they have not communicated ideas to you, and you don't know what the arguments are, that's not your fault. That's their fault. You are the judges. You get to decide. And so those ideas communicated per minute, that's what's important. And if you don't understand the arguments as a judge, not your problem. Okay? And let's see what else I got. Oh, let's talk about pricing in. What does that phrase mean? It's priced in. Yeah. So talk about it more specifically, like politics debate. When they say, our uniqueness evidence on tax reform is priced these numbers in.
What that concept our uniqueness says that even if that concept
Okay, so what should, like, if losers lose is true, what was the status right now for Trump? What was his last big legislative agenda item? Healthcare. How'd that turn out for him? A lot. So, is he losing now? Does anybody see if we're going to go and try to win a link based on losers lose, and he just lost healthcare, I don't know, 2 days ago, 3 days ago, 4 days ago, how is there any uniqueness for losers lose? He's losing now. Yeah? And, yeah, that's not that that's incorrect, but can you put it in the context of priced in? Priced in means if we have a uniqueness card, and this is the trick of politics always, which is, hey, that might be true, but we have a card right now that says tax reform is going to pass. So it might be true, like maybe tax reform was going to pass by a huge margin a week ago. And now because he's a loser, it's only going to pass by a couple votes. But doesn't matter. We got a card from this morning, late last night. It's priced in. Russia, healthcare, all of those kinds of things. It's kind of the reason, it's kind of the unstated assumption in most high school debates that politics is good. It's like, you know, to say, oh, we have more recent evidence. Well, you have more recent evidence, and in politics that matters because all of these thumpers are priced in right now. They have the votes now, which then means all their other arguments, and some of these may or may not be in the 2 and R. But I just remember from the 1 and R, the arguments that we were talking about there, all of a sudden make a big difference. Because we know it's going to pass now, the firestorm that's caused by DeVos or whatever, if those arguments are in the debate, all of a sudden, what the original 1 and C link is might not be as important as it was way back then. So, last thing I was going to talk about, I mean, maybe some of you were timing even after I told you out the time. Way back in the 2AC, did anybody get worried about the spending DA? Like, I kind of thought that this timer mistake maybe had already happened. Like, there was 42 seconds left when Marge said, the spending DA. And I was like, ooh, may not be the best start to this debate, but now was that planned in the sense of even if she, like, it makes sense that that would be the last thing that she would cover, like politics, and it kind of depends. I don't know about you all, how much backstory you have on this, but if a Michigan State debater is the 2 and R, I like a good bet that the politics DA is going to be in the 2 and R, and so if I'm going to make a coverage error, I'm going to make a coverage error on the spending DA, not on the politics DA. The other reason I might not be afraid to make the coverage error, and it might not even be a coverage error, the spending DA is historically not great. $20 trillion in debt, and so we're going to spend, even if I'm right, and it's like $1 trillion. The plan is $1 trillion. That's 1/20 of our debt right now. What's the difference between 21 trillion and 20 trillion? Also, the plan, if it really truly solves educational inequality and makes it so a huge number of people that aren't working now are qualified to get jobs in the aerospace industry, that's really, really good for our economy. And if anything is going to create long-term economic growth that can solve our debt problems, we need people to be working. We've got to fuel the neoliberal capitalist machine to save our economy, and the plan does that. And so they don't need that many arguments against the spending dissat, and it's less likely to show up in the 2NR because I know that the 2NR used to debate in Michigan State. So I can make a strategic guess for those reasons that maybe that I don't need to spend as much time there. I'm sorry, I'm holding you up.
Okay, is everyone ready for an order? All right, I'm going to do something a little bit innovative. Actually, I'm not. It's inequality, international law, the counterplan, politics. plan is that they simply don't have the cheddar. Now, they say follow on. Their evidence is about conservative educational policies being modeled by the federal government, like No Child Left Behind and ECA. That is distinct from the affirmative, which Trump, DeVos, and everyone else in Congress wouldn't be in support of, given that it is controlled by the Republicans. The thesis of their politics link requires that they do not solve any federal follow-on. This is Trump's America, and he controls Congress independently. DeVos is so against our affirmative, so she wouldn't do it. They say the courts would follow on. They have card zero on this. The only card in this debate is the Robinson 15 or maybe 16 card that says the counterplan would be struck down in the courts, meaning that not only is there no follow-on, but the counterplan literally ceases to exist. The 2NR has not answered this argument, which means that you should assume that in about 6 months the counterplan will cease to exist, and the affirmative is the only chance to be able to solve. Now, solvency. It doesn't solve the international law advantage because the bank's evidence is the only card specific to education and international law. It says that for an international right to education to be modeled by other countries, it has to start with the federal government, because international courts are not allowed to cite sub-national courts in their decision. They are only allowed to cite the U.S. Supreme Court for it to happen, which means that there is no modeling of the counterplan. Let's not perceive. Countries are weary of state commitments. They want to see Trump make an actual commitment to the right to education. So it cannot solve, but also is not able to resolve funding because they literally have no cash. That was done above. Now the disadvantage. I'm getting here with so little time because the counterplan does not solve the affirmative, and they've conceded it gets rolled back, and they've conceded that at worst 1,000 people die. Other important concessions. One, pharma doesn't solve diseases in time. Vaccines take a decade to get on the market because of FDA rules, which means even if there is a big impact, they don't solve it. Two, there are no emergent diseases that exist right now, so you should feel comfortable allowing tax reform to not pass because there's no potential impacts. Three is case turns to DA, which already was about. The dissent does not turn the case. Their examples assume the United States federal government can't walk and chew gum at the same time. The military is not responsible for disease controls. Neither is the State Department. Finally, the ACA thumper proves uniqueness overwhelms the link. So does the midterms argument. If the GOP is so concerned about the midterms, then they won't care about the plan. They'll just pass the bill no matter what, because they've already seen so many losses.
Again, most of you should not have been timing, and I think we kind of forgot about the inequitable distribution of the 2NR having 6.5 minutes against 5-minute 2AR, and I didn't really even think about that. The 2AR was so good on the counterplan, I wasn't really even thinking about that until she was just like, oh, I only need a few answers on the politics team. And I was like, why is that? And I was like, oh yeah, because you only had 5 minutes to deal with 6.5 minutes of stuff. So, great job, Mark. Okay, some of you should have had instructions already from your lab leaders, some not. I included, if you go to that demo debate page in your computer, it says, here's your instructions on how to make decisions. Please look at that. And also, they're uploading the files so you can look at the cards. If you want to come down and ask a couple questions, at least take 10 or 15 minutes and make a good, careful decision before you click the vote button. Don't just be like, well, obviously that 2AR was awesome, but you can say that, but like, think about what the 2NR said. Use your flows to decide before you just click the button and say, I'm voting for this person.
If you are in my lab, you are
Save your
expected
flows.
to write out a decision